Hello everyone, Surfing Pikachu here, back with another Boomsday Project card review. This time we'll be doing all the neutral cards. First up, War Gear, 5 mana 5/5 magnetic mech. So, it's a 5 mana 5/5, which is below average, but the magnetic means that on a mech, this is a +5/+5 buff for 5 mana, which it's about the same value as Blessing of Kings, 5 mana for 5 damage on that turn. That's pretty fine. So it's kind of average, yeah. But so this might see play in a mid-range, like a mid-range mech deck because it's like a good buff, just like Blessing of Kings, which saw play in mid-range Paladin. Next is Upgradable Framebot, 2 mana 1/5 mech. So this is really sticky for a tube drop because it's really hard to deal 5 damage on turn 2 or 3. But the one attack is really what's holding this back. Uh, it's a mech, so that means it's easy to magnetize onto, but like that one attack means you're not getting that much value. It's mostly you're gonna have you can't really trade if you don't have any buffs on it. Like maybe against aggro paladin, like aggro odd paladin, but there's 1/3s that basically do the same job for 1 mana cheaper. I mean, this is also great. This is just a great buff target though, so it might just see play as in like rogue for cold blood and stuff like that. Next up, Fateful Lumi, 1 mana 1/1 Battlecry, give a friendly mech +1/+1. Um, this is fine. It's basically a 1 mana 1/2 if you just add up the stats, but you need a mech to target for this buff, so that might well, it shouldn't be that hard for a dedicated mech deck, but otherwise, like there might just be too many mechs in this expansion, so I don't think this might just be cut because it's not really that great. Next up, Goblin Bomb, 1 mana 0/2 Death Rattle, deal 2 damage to the enemy hero. I mean, this is great when it's summoned from other minions, but I don't think you would want to play it by itself because it's like a Lepronome except you can't attack into it, and your opponent can just trade into it for free. Next up, Bronze Gatekeeper, 3 mana 1/5 Taunt Magnetic Mech. So yeah, a 3 mana 1/5 isn't awful. I mean, I think that's the limit for neutral stats for a taunt at 3 mana, because a 2/5 would be a little too strong, and a 1/6 is pretty strong, as we've seen with Druid's 1/6 taunt. So this is the limit for like vanilla taunt stats at 3 mana. But the magnetic makes it really nice because you can magnetize this onto any like mech that's like a good taunt target. Like you buffed up a mech already. Also, it curves nicely into upgradable framebot. It becomes a 2/10 with taunt, which is really hard to get rid of. Next up, Coppertail Imposture, 4 mana 4/4. Battlecry gains stealth until your next turn. So this is kind of just like a Stranglethorn Tiger. It's a sort of vanilla stats, like only it's slightly below average, and it has stealth. This might be better than Stranglethorn just because, like for this mana cost, it might be better just because it's a mech. So you're basically guaranteed to get the magnetic buff onto it because there's not really many ways to get rid of a stealth minion. Next up, Explodinator. 4 mana 3/2 Battlecry, summon 2/0/2 Goblin Bombs. This is pretty good actually. It summons a bunch of mechs, so it's kind of hard to get rid of for your opponent because they have to deal 2 damage to everything, and then they just take 4 face damage, which may or may not be worth it, just to clear your board of a 3/2 and 2/0/2s. But if they don't clear your board, then you have 3 targets to magnetize with, and that's pretty good. Next up, Scatterbot, 1 mana 1/1 Magnetic Rush Mech. So, this is really not that good. First off, Rush is just a worse charge, and Stone Tusk Boar would just be better than this. Even though it has magnetic, giving something Rush isn't really that valuable. Uh, like giving something, paying mana to give something Rush isn't valuable compared to Houndmaster Shaw. That's just a passive aura, so that makes it much more valuable because you're only giving Rush to one target, and especially it's only mechs. So I don't think this probably won't see play. Next up, Brainstormer. 3 mana, 3/1 Battlecry, gain +1 health for each spell in your hand. So in order for this to have vanilla stats, you have to have at least 3 spells in your hand. And there are some decks that can do this, but like I don't know how much harder it is. Just it's a little bit harder having more spells in your hand than just having cards in your hand compared to Twilight Drake. And Twilight Drake's also a dragon, so it has some synergies there. This really doesn't have much synergy. Next up, Bulldozer. 9 mana, 9/7 mech, Divine Shield. Uh, well, there's Force Tank Max from Goblins vs. Gnome, which is just 2 attack lower than this for 1 more mana. And the biggest problem with 9 mana minions is that they're basically the same as 10 mana minions, because you can't. The best part about 8 mana minions is 8 mana minions or spells is that you can play them and then hero power also if you don't have any other cards to combo. This one, this is just takes up your entire turn for a 9/7 Divine Shield, which isn't great because it doesn't help advance or it doesn't help like um protect your board state really. And like your opponent can just ignore it if they because 9 attack at 9 mana usually aggro decks usually have you at like a couple health at that point. Next up, Close Gale Chemist, 2 mana 1/2 Stealth Divine Shield. So this is really good with buffs. I mean, it's probably even better than Upgradable Frame Buff just because of Divine Shield and the Stealth. So, I mean, yeah, this is just really good. But let's just compare it to a couple stuff. For Ardent Squire, you get one. It's 1 more mana for Stealth and +1 health, which is worth it honestly, because the Divine Shield just protects it from any damage, and that's just protects it from board clears too. So I feel like this is better than Upgradable Frame Butt if you're looking for a good buff target. But otherwise, this, yeah, no, it's not a mechs, so it doesn't really synergize with anything else. But just a okay standalone minion. Next up, Damage Stegotron, 6 mana, 5/12, Taunt, Battlecry, deal 6 damage to this minion, and it's also a mech. So when you play it, it's a 6 mana 5/6 with taunt. Unless you can cheat it out, that isn't great. But there are a couple ways to cheat this out, like does the shaman spell and also what else? The warrior legendary spell also cheats this out. So I mean, if you can find a way to cheat this out, it's a pretty good stat line. But and like compared to Witchwood Grizzly, if you're cheating it out, this has +2 attack, which actually does make a difference, going from 3 to 5 attack. So, I don't know if there's enough ways to cheat this out to make this good, because otherwise it's really bad, like a bad vanilla minion. Next up, Right. Electro Right. 3 mana 3/3, Battlecry. If you're holding a spell that costs 5 or more, gain +1/+1. So, holding a spell that costs 5 more isn't hard for a lot of decks, but the decks that you want to run this in, the decks that this synergizes with, you kind of don't really want to run this in, because just a 3 mana 4/4. So, I mean, aggro decks would like that, but usually they don't run that many things that cost 5 or more, and especially not many spells. Like there's Bloodlust, Level Up, um, I think that's really it, honestly, for most aggro spells. Maybe Pyroblast and Mage, but the biggest thing with all those spells is that they all like push for damage, and this really doesn't want. And you don't even really run that many. You only run 2 copies of spells that cost 5 or more in aggro decks, which you'd want to run this in. So it's very low chance of this going off, and it's just a 3 mana 3/3 in that case. So it's really not that great. Next up, Kaboombot. 3 mana 2/2 Death Rattle, deal 4 damage to a random enemy minion. It's also a mech. Uh, so if you compare this to Spider Bomb and Hunter, this Spider Bomb's stronger, but it's also a class card, so it's allowed to be a little stronger. And this is fine. Spider Bomb's a fairly strong tempo card, but it just doesn't It's just kind of weird in Hunter, and this is a pretty good neutral minion. So it's okay. It's just kind of vanilla, honestly. That's a thing. Next up, Mecharoo. 1 mana, 1/1 Death Rattle, summon a 1/1 Joey bot, and the Joey bot's also a mech. So this is pretty good. It's a 1 mana, 1/1 mech, which is okay, but it has a Death Rattle that summons another mech. So this is great for mech decks because you can put this down, and it's really hard to get rid of on turn 1 because you have to somehow deal 1 damage twice. So yeah, I think this might be one of the best cards of this set actually, especially since it actually does synergize with the Hunter 2/1 that triggers Death Rattles on mechs. Next up, Microtech Controller. 3 mana 2/1 Battlecry summon 2 1/1 Microbots. Uh well, it's a 3 mana 4/3 if you look at the total stats, but they all have 1 health, which makes them all really easy to get rid of. So I don't think it's gonna be that good. Like if you like that 1 to 2 health really does matter. Like if this was a 1/2, it might be playable, but since it's a 2/1, you're kind of wasting 3 mana on things that will probably be cleared the next turn. Next up, Piloted Reaper. 4 mana, 4/3 Death Rattle, summon a random minion from your hand that costs 2 or less. So yeah, this is obviously an homage to Piloted Treader, which was one of the best minions at the time of its release. But like like that one was guaranteed to summon a minion. It was always sticky. This one isn't guaranteed to summon a minion, so it makes it worse. But like you're comparing some if it's a worse piloted shredder, that's still pretty good because piloted shredder is still one of the best 4 drops, like standalone 4 drops in the game. So yeah. Also, this doesn't have a chance of dropping a Doomsayer unless you put Doomsayer in your deck, so that upside for me. Next up, Rusty Recycler, 5 mana, 2/6 Taunt Lifesteal mech. So, 5 mana for a 2/6 Taunt isn't great. I mean, Lifesteal's nice, but it's only on a 2 attack minion, so it's not really that valuable. But otherwise, this is a fine arena card, but it probably won't see constructed play. Next up, Spring Rocket, 3 mana, 2/1 Battlecry, deal 2 damage. So, it's a 2/1, which is worth about 1 mana. And then dealing 2 damage is also worth about 1 mana, as we've seen with Arcane Shot. And then you smush that together and put it into 1 card. You add 1 more mana because you're basically smushing 2 cards into 1. And I mean, it's fine for arena. Dealing 2 damage is also nice, but if you look 1 mana higher, you get Fire Plume Phoenix, which is just better, has much better stats for its cost. And this is also a mech, which might be relevant compared to Fire Plume Phoenix, but I don't know if it being a mech really makes a difference because it's really hard to magnetize on anyway because it only has 1 health, so it doesn't really stick. So yeah, this is just an okay card. Next up, Steel Rager, 4 mana, 5/1 Rush mech. Uh, it's better than all the other Ragers, which isn't saying much because at least it has Rush. Like if a Rager had charge, that'd be great, but this just has Rush, which is okay. It's a 4 mana 5/1, which is really bad stats. But if you look at it with Rush, it's basically just 4 mana deal 5 damage to a minion, which is There's most classes have better ways to do that, so this definitely won't see play just in most places. I don't know. I don't think there's a class that really struggles with dealing 5 damage on 4 mana. Next up, Toxicologist. 2 mana 2/2 Battlecry, give your weapon +1 attack. I mean, it's 2 mana 2/2 isn't terrible stats for that cost, but it's really not the greatest. Its effect is okay. Like, it'd be great in Kingsbane Rogue, and that's really all I can think of. Because Kingsbane Rogue has been like neutered since the rotations, so I don't think this will see play. Especially since there's not many decks that really need like weapon buffs. So next up, Whirly Glider, 2 mana 2/1, summon a 0/2 Goblin Bomb. This is pretty nice actually. 2 mana 2/1 isn't like the greatest stats, but it's not that bad. And those Goblin Bombs are pretty nice because they're mechs that you can magnetize onto. The biggest problem is like compared to not really, but the biggest problem with this is like it's not a mech itself. So this would be an okay magnetic target, but you have to sell with magnetizing the Goblin Bomb it summons. So yeah. Next up, Giggling Inventor, 5 mana 2/1. Battlecry summon 2/1/2 mechs with Taunt and Divine Shield. And those would just be more Annoyatrons. And well, Annoyatrons are really good, but the stats the summons is kind of really low, especially since the minion itself is really easy. This minion itself is really easy to get rid of because it's a 2/1. If it was a 1/2, honestly, I'd like the flavor more, but this is just an okay card. Um, but like Divine Shield means that those mechs, the Annoyatrons, are really easy to magnetize to, so that it might just see play in mech decks. Next up, Mechanical Whelp, 6 mana 2/2, Death Rattle, summon a 7/7 Mechanical Dragon. Um, the, the biggest problem with this is how small it is, because like your opponent will definitely just ignore it, so you have to find a way to trigger the Death Rattle on its own without just dropping it on turn 6 and not doing anything with it until the next turn. So the best class for that would be Hunter, and I don't know if Hunter would really want to run this at all. Next up, Missile Launcher, 6 mana 5/5 magnetic. At the end of your turn, deal 1 damage to all other characters. The stats aren't anything worth like going for, but that magnetic really does help because there is a poisonous mech, and there's also a mech that freezes when it deals damage, which would be in wild, but that's still a great combo. But with poisonous, it's a 8 mana 6/6 that destroys all minions at the end of your turn, which is just a great board clear. Uh, it's such a good board clear. I might say that it might make like Control Hunter a thing, but probably not still. But just such a good combo that I have to mention it. Next up, Replicating Menace, 4 mana 3/1 magnetic. Death Rattle, summon 3 1/1 microbots. So this is one of the few magnetic mechs that has more attack than its health. So that makes it great for aggro, especially since the Death Rattle means it's really sticky. But against Defile, which is definitely still in the meta, this is really a weak card because the Death Rattle doesn't really do much. But against most other decks, this is still a really good card. 3 1/1s is really insane in terms of how sticky it is. Next up, Arcane Dynamo, 6 mana 3/5, 3/4. Battlecry, discover a spell that costs 5 or more. The thing with this is that there's not many spells that cost 5 or more in most classes, so you're basically guaranteed to get like a couple spells in most classes. Like in Mage, this would be almost a guaranteed Flame Strike, almost a guaranteed Luna's Pocket Dimension, just every, like Pyroblast. Just there's only so many options for this effect that it really makes this really reliable for like a couple decks. So it might actually see play because you're probably getting a couple reliable options to choose from. Next up, Galvanizer, 2 mana 1/2 mech. Battlecry, reduce the cost of mechs in your hand by 1. So Fireplume Harbinger is a class card that reduces the cost of elementals in your hand by 1. And it's only a 1/1. This is a 1/2, and that makes a much bigger difference. That 2 health is much harder to get rid of than that 1 health. And this is a neutral mech, so it just synergize. It can just go into any deck, really. But the best deck it would probably go into is like a more controlling mech deck. So most of the mech decks seem like more tempo or aggro. I don't really know if this will see play just because it has weak stats for that cost. Next up, Spark Drill, 6 mana 5/1 Rush. That's about add 2 1/1 Sparks with Rush to your hand. So, I mean, there's fire, there's the Steel Rager in this set that's honestly much better than this because it's a cheaper Rush. The Death Rattle is pretty bad because those 1/1s cost 1, I think, because they're the same token as the they're the same token as the Shaman Sparks, so they do cost 1, and you have to pay 1 mana for 2 for a 1/1 with Rush, which is really not that great. So yeah. Next up, Unpowered Mauler, 2 mana 2/4, can only attack if you cast a spell this turn. Yeah, this isn't really worth it. You have to cast a spell every single turn, or else it doesn't attack, and it's only a 2/4, which isn't really that overstated, so it's really not worth it. Worth like figuring out how to cast a spell every turn to get the value out of it. Next up, Spark Engine, 2 mana 2/1, Battlecry at a 1/1 Spark with Rush to your hand. So you can sort of see this as a 2 mana 2/1 draw a bad card, which is fine. Like a 1/1, the 1/1 Spark still costs 1 mana, so it's really meh. And a 2 mana 2/1 isn't the greatest, but there's still 2/1s that are playable that draw cards like Loot Hoarder. So this potentially can see play, especially since it's aggressively statted. Next up, Omega Defender, 4 mana 2/6, taunt Battlecry. If you have a 10 mana crystals, gain 10 attack. So this isn't good in constructed because it's a 4 mana 2/6 on turn 4. 12/6 on turn 10 isn't really that great because 6 health on turn 10 is really easy to get rid of, honestly. But in Arena, this is just gonna be way too overpowered, honestly. Otherwise, this probably won't see play in in uh in a constructed because at 10 mana crystals, a 4 mana 12/6 taunt isn't even that good. At that mana you want to finish off your opponent, really. Next up, 4 mana 4/3, Weaponized Pinata. Death Rattle, add a random legendary minion to your hand, is also a mech. So, random legendary minions aren't actually that good anymore compared to like GVG, because there's a lot of small like legendary minions, and there's also a lot of bad legendary minions that you don't want to play, like Millhouse. Camellias might be okay because it's adding to your hand, but there's a lot of small ones that are not that great, and there's just a ton of like bad legendaries now, so I don't think this will see play. But it's a fun card. Next up, 7 mana 7/7, Star Aligner. Battlecry. If you control 3 minions with 7 health, deal 7 damage to all enemies. So dealing 7 damage to all enemies, that includes your opponent's face, is really amazing. But the setup for this might be just a little too hard. And that's really the point, because it's called Star Aligner. So most of the time it's just a 7 mana 7/7, and there aren't really that many ways to combo with this in Standard. In Wild, Druid has a bunch of ways to combo with this, but that's Druid, and Druid is just insane in Wild. But otherwise, this won't see play in Standard, and it might see play in like a weird combo Druid, especially since it's basically a game-ending ability. Next up, Augmented Elic, 3 mana 3/4. Whenever you shuffle a card into a deck, shuffle in an extra copy. So, for Academic Espionage, that shuffles 10 cards into your deck. This would add one more, would copy each one, so you shuffle 20 cards into your deck. But I mean, 3 mana 3/4 is fine, but you're not really playing it for the stats. You're playing it to combo with a shuffling card like Lab Recruiter or Academic Espionage. Otherwise, you're not really getting the value out of this minion. So that's a 7 mana combo or a 5 mana combo for Lab Recruiter's case. So yeah, those are kind of expensive, so I don't know if this will see play, but it's definitely a fun idea to mess around with. Next up, EMP Operative, 5 mana 3/3 Battlecry Destroy Mech. Yeah, no, this is awful. Compared to freaking Hemet Nessing, Sanctuary from GVG. That was a 5 mana 6/3 at least, and it destroyed a beast. This destroys a mech, which might be relevant, but really, how many? I don't think there will be that many mechs, like mech decks, that this will have to be run. So this is really not good. Next up, Sephorian Bomber. 5 mana 5/5, Battlecry. Shuffle a bomb into your opponent's deck. When drawn, it explodes for 5 damage. This combos with Augmented Elic that I just talked about. But I mean the stats are fine. It's a 5 mana 5/5 with an upside. So, but shuffling a bomb into your opponent's deck isn't really great because it's only one card. You have to combo it with like Augmented Elic or like bounce it back and replay it, or else just shuffling one bomb that deals 5 damage isn't really gonna turn the tide of the match. Next up, Crystallizer, 1 mana 1/3. Battlecry, deal 5 damage to your hero, gain 5 armor. So this is basically just a 1 mana 1/3 because the Battlecry doesn't do anything unless you're below 5 health. But this is definitely nice for a Warlock because it would, especially Zoo, because they're playing all this heal package stuff, and this helps you activate your heal stuff while not actually dealing you any damage. So yeah, this is pretty good. Next up, Holomancer, 5 mana 3/3. After your opponent plays a minion, summon a 1/1 copy of it. This is awful, because it's a 5 mana 3/3, and your opponent gets the choice of what they want to give you. And they can just give you nothing. They can just kill this immediately, and you just wasted 5 mana doing nothing, really. So yeah, not really good card. Not a really good card. 5 mana 6/6, Loose Specimen. Battlecry, deals 6 damage randomly split among other friendly minions. So, the drawback is kind of significant because it's like it's like getting shot with 2 arcane missiles, and arcane missiles is definitely a good card. But I mean, it's a 5 mana 6/6. If you can somehow play it on an empty board, it's okay. Or if it's just a board, yeah, or a board like big minions that 1 damage to them won't be a big deal. But otherwise, this probably won't see play, especially since the upside of playing it isn't like worth the cost, like the Battlecry cost, because it's only 1 stat over vanilla stats. Next up, Ziliax, 5 mana 3/2, Magnetic, Divine Shield, Taunt, Lifesteal, and Rush. So this is one of the best Magnetic cards, especially since it's aggressively statted for its boost. And Divine Shield Lifesteal Rush is really a good combo. So yeah, this will probably see play in a mech deck, especially with Mech Warpers and Wild. Next up, Whizbang the Wonderful, 4 mana 4/5, but the stats don't really matter. You start the game with one of Whizbang's wonderful decks. And what those decks would be each of the latest deck recipes for each class. So, like, this is completely an awful card, no question, because those deck recipes are tier 3 decks at best. Like, there was only one good one last expansion, like one amazing one, which was the Even Paladin one, because it was just like a worse version of like the meta version of Even Paladin. But otherwise, this is definitely just a fun card. Like, you only play this for fun because you're not gonna be able to win. You're not gonna win many games with one of Whizbang's wonderful decks. Next up, Mechathune, 10 mana, 10/10 mech. Death Rattle. If you have no cards in your deck, hand, and battlefield, destroy the enemy hero. So this is really hard to pull off, but you just win if you do pull it off. And people have been theory crafting ways to do this, but there's definitely no real good way of doing this. So it'll just be like experimented with, but thrown away when all the meta decks come in and shown that this effect is way too slow. But really, I'm gonna figure out a way to make this at least get a 40% win rate. That's what I'm gonna try this when the expansion comes out. Next up, Subject 9, 5 mana 4/4, Battlecry, draw 5 different secrets from your deck. So there's no real decks that want to play 5 different secrets because there's not a ton of great secrets. The class with the best secrets right now is definitely Hunter, but you're only running three of them. There's Wandering Monster, Freezing Trap, and Explosive Trap. Sometimes Rat Trap, but Rat Trap is just kind of middle. But even if you only summon, even if you're going to draw 2 cards from this is still pretty decent. The biggest problem is like drawing secrets. You have to. This is a one-off in your deck, so you have to draw this before you draw all your other secrets before you play it too. So I don't think this will see play, even though the effect is pretty good actually. Maybe in the future if there's better secrets, but the biggest problem right now is that there's not enough good secrets. Next up, Harbinger Celestia, 4 mana 5/6 stealth. After your opponent plays a minion, summon a copy of it. So this is a 4 mana 5/6, which is overstated, and that's pretty good, but that effect really doesn't help it. It's supposed to be a tech against like decks that only play big minions, so like Recruit Hunter or like Big Priest, but there's just gonna be too many aggro decks in like the game, like at all times. There's always some sort of aggro deck. So like if you face that and you play this, you're just gonna lose. So yeah, this won't see play. And that's it for all the cards. So overall for the Boomsday expansion, it's a pretty high level power level expansion compared to Witchwood, which only a couple of cards really see play. So yeah, I'm really excited for the upcoming expansion, which should come out the day that I'm posting this video. See you next time for whenever I do another video, which will be in like 10 months.